Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. Today I'm counting down my top 10 albums of 2020. And kicking things off is Proto-Martyr with Ultimate Success Today. Brutal, aggressive, and unrelenting are just some of the words that I describe the music on this record. There's something about the mix of vocals, lyrics, and instrumentation that just works so well for me, but it's the saxophone on here that just puts it over the top. It's unexpected and somewhat counterintuitive to mix with their post-punk sound, but just something about it really works. And it's one of those things like, once you hear it, you go, of course that sounds good together. But I think it's one of those things where if you didn't hear it before, on paper, you'd be like, no, that sounds terrible. Why would you do that? But something about that wailing sax really adds to the brutal nature of this record. And it really is a journey from beginning to end, but the fact that the last track has a little bit of hope, it keeps me coming back. At number 9, I have King Cruel with Man Alive. King Cruel brings us his signature swagger with a seemingly dark record, but the darkness really comes from the mood of the music rather than the lyrical outlook, if that makes any sense. This, to me, the best way I can describe this album is walking alone at midnight in a deserted city. It's not scary, but it's echoey. There's perhaps a blanket of fog that sort of obscures your long distance vision. And it's familiar yet a little eerie because, you know, these lights cast strange shadows. And I just feel like it's one of those walks where you just kind of get lost in your own head and perhaps you're thinking about how you would have done things differently in your life. And that to me is this record in a nutshell. It's just got such a great vibe and mood about it. You know, and this was an album that I initially was on my top 10, and then I took it out for a while. I put it in my runners-up, but then I brought it back in because of the visceral nature of it, because it is so evocative, because it does bring out these feelings and imagery to me. Even without the lyrics, I have my own response to it, independent of what King Cruel was intending with this album. But I think it's a multi-layered album and there's a lot to dive into, so it came back on my list. Coming in at number 8, I have Thundercat, It Is What It Is. So this was another record I wrestled with. Initially, I put it on my top 10 list and then I took it off because it felt like he didn't really push himself. It just felt like more of the same, like Drunk 2.0. And so I wasn't that initially impressed with it. But as I was compiling my list, I came back to it and I had fresher ears. And I realized he doesn't push his sound into uncharted territory. That's a given, but what I think he does do is refine his signature sound and perhaps inject it with a bit more maturity than on Drunk. And overall, what put it on this list was the fact that it's a feel-good, funky, groovy record with some fantastic guest musicians. Really, this record shouldn't be missed. At the number 7 spot, I have Hum with Inlet. After a nearly 22-year hiatus, Hum came back with their 5th album, and I was blown away. It's like these guys haven't skipped a beat. I don't know what they were doing in that hiatus, but they didn't lose their sound. This picks up right where they left off. And I remember when You'd Prefer an Astronaut came out. I absolutely loved that album. And I never really explored much from them. And truth be told, they only released another album after that. And then there was this huge long break. And then they came back with Inlet. And if you were to tell me that this was a lost album from that time period, I would totally believe you. This is sludgy metal shoegaze at its finest. And it totally evokes that mid to late 90s sound. If you love that, you're gonna love this record. At number 6, I have Moses Sumney with Gray. This is his 2nd album, and I am thoroughly impressed with the music on here. There is so much variety from the song styles and structures to the instrumentations, but it's the textures he creates with his voice that just baffles me. I don't know how he do it. In fact, I don't know how he comes up with a lot of these songs, But there they are. They're so creative and interesting to listen to. And at over an hour long, there is a lot to uncover. To sum up, this is a beautiful record that should not be missed. Moses Sumney is an immense talent, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with next. Coming at number 5, I have Dan Deacon's Mystic Familiar. This record is on another level. It is a wonderful electronic odyssey. To me, this is pure magic in sonic form. The way Dan thinks about sounds and melody is fascinating. It is so interesting to listen to this album. I feel like it's a window into his thought process and creativity, but all of it, push that all aside, I love this record because it puts a smile on my face. At number 4, I have Phoebe Bridgers with Punisher. I love her voice and the overall mood of this record. It's gentle and uplifting without ever feeling cheesy. Musically, I would put this in the realm of indie folk, indie rock, but it's got these great arpeggiated guitars, strings, and soft synths. And I am just thoroughly impressed with this being only her second album under her own name. It is very well produced. But more so, this was my safe space in 2020. Anytime things got crazy or out of hand, or I just felt overwhelmed with what was going on in the world, I would put this record on and I'd find my happy place. And that is why this is so high on my list. Now we come down to my top 3 records, and this was not an easy pick. Oh my gosh. I kept shuffling around these 3 albums. I would move them around because depending on the given time or day, any one of these could have been my top album of 2020, but I eventually settled on this list. So without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 3 is The Strokes with The New Abnormal. I mean, you know what you're gonna get with this album. This is The Strokes, pure, unfiltered, distilled The Strokes. It's nothing new. They don't tread any new ground on here, but yet they do it so well. This is their best effort in years. I love this record so much from track to track. It is so strong. It is so them. It is so perfect in a sense. And it came along at the best possible time of 2020. It was like a warm blanket. This was so comforting to listen to that I fell in love with it. They didn't need to do anything other than this album. It is just pure bliss listening to this. I love it. I love this record. At the number 2 spot, I have Gorillaz with Song Machine Season 1, Strange Times. And I want to preface this by saying I prefer the standard edition album versus the deluxe edition. And the reason being is I feel like after the standard edition ends and you get into the deluxe territory tracks, it loses its way. It's not as interesting, it's not as compelling, and you lose the essence of Gorillaz in those moments. But if you just listen, in my opinion, if you just listen to the standard edition, it is so very good. This is up there with Demon Days and Plastic Beach. And I get the criticisms against Humans and the Now Now. I still love those albums, but I think where they falter is the fact that the guests sort of took over and you didn't get enough of the Gorillaz, whereas this album is a perfect blend between, the perfect balance, I should say, between the Gorillaz, specifically 2D's vocals, and the guests. And the guests on here are so good, from the up-and-comers to the classic artists like Elton John. I mean, you got Robert Smith on here, you got Peter Hook on here. I mean, I could go on, and it's just a wonderful blend of all these different song styles and genres. I love the flow of it. I love from song to song to song. There is just so much to love about this, and I'm just so thankful that Gorillaz are continuing to be a mover and shaker in the musical landscape. And at the number 1 spot, I have Circles by Mac Miller. This was the first album I fell in love with of 2020. It came out early in January, around the same time I'm recording this video, and I initially was apprehensive to push play because I had these preconceived notions of who Mac Miller was, and I figured, I'm probably not gonna like him. It's probably some poppy hip hop that's more for people younger than me. But I took a chance and it blew me away. I cannot begin to describe like just the series of emotions I went through listening to this record because it is so varied, it is so personal. And I can't help but get a little influenced by the fact that this was a posthumous release, considering that Mac Miller died in 2018, well before this album was completed. He was working on it. And then the fact that it came together so well, it didn't feel forced, it didn't feel incomplete at all. It is so personal. It is such a window into his life at the time. And if you go back and listen to his first album, which I believe came out in 2010, you listen to this, there's like a lifetime of events that happened in experience. This guy lived a lifetime in his short time on this planet. And the fact that he can so eloquently write his thoughts and feelings in lyric form is just, it makes it all that more tragic that he's gone, because I really wanted to hear where else he was going to go from here, because this just, the song styles and flow, it just, I mean, yeah, it treads on hip hop, but there's moments of introspective guitar work. There's like kind of funky, happy little moments. Overall, it's got a very chill, soulful vibe about it. It's perfect for a Saturday, Sunday afternoon drive. And there's a feel-goodness about it. It is bittersweet because he is gone, but he left us this gift of an album, and I'm just so impressed with it. I mean, it turned me on to the rest of his discography, to be honest, because after I listened to this, I was like, whoa, who is this guy? What have I been missing out on? And I immediately went down this rabbit hole and just listened to his whole discography, and I became a fan. And it just bums me out that he's gone, because he was such a talented lyricist, a poet, and there is a lot of pathos on this album. You feel his hurt, you feel what he's going through, and there's the song "Good News" especially, where I really resonated, because here he sings about how, you know, all they want to hear about is the good news. They don't want to hear about what's bothering me or what's getting me down. And I feel like that's very relatable. And especially for a time of year like we all had in 2020, I think everyone can get something out of that song and this album in particular. And that's why it's my #1 pick of 2020. All right, everybody, that will do it for today. Be sure to leave me a comment with your own top 10 of 2020. I'd be curious to check that out. Until then, I want to thank you all so much for watching, but I especially want to thank my members over on Patreon. I am your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Hey everybody, thanks again for watching my top 10 albums of 2020. Now stay tuned, as I will be releasing my top 10 artists that were new to me, as well as my top 10 singles of 2020. This is the first time I'm doing this type of video, so check it out when they're available.